in any campaign, you have to have a lot of strategies. You've got different populations. You've got educated populations. You have non-educated populations. You have older populations. You have younger populations. You have urban populations, rural populations, religious populations, non-religious populations. So you have a lot of different strategies. The strategy that you've just mentioned about not dumping it on my mother is absolutely one that is widely used. We take it even another step to help it really bring it home to people. Is in this country, what is deeply believed is that, and across the world, but here specifically, where God lives, where we worship God, that place is a temple. In traditions where we don't necessarily see God in that form, it's not necessarily a belief. So for example, we don't necessarily believe that Jesus Christ is there in that particular cross. It's a way to remember him, a way to connect with him, a way to remind ourselves, but you don't necessarily say, right here in this, which I'm holding, is Jesus Christ specifically or personally. Here in this country, because there's such a widespread tradition of worshiping the divine in form, through form. They're not actually worshiping idols. This is something we remind people and explain so frequently. It's not worshiping the idol. It's worshiping the ideal of the divine through the statue. But there is a very deep belief that the divine has infused that image with divine presence. And I mention this because when we then construct temples around the image, the belief is the divine lives here, is actually present in this temple in this form. And the way that we take that campaign is we say, look, you come to the banks of Ganga, we perform arati. Well, arati is performed to the divine. In a Krishna temple, people perform arati to Krishna. In a Ram temple, people are going to perform arati to Ram. In a Shiva temple, people will perform arati to Shiva. When the guru goes into someone's home, people perform arati to the guru as an embodiment of the divine. So arati is performed to the divine. So we perform arati to Ganga. Means Ganga is the goddess, which means that her banks and her waters, her form, are a temple. If God lives there, this place is a temple. And nobody could imagine, nobody of any religion could imagine walking into their priest or their minister or their rabbi or their imam and saying, excuse me, but I don't have anything to do with my household waste. I have no place to put it. Would you mind if I brought it here and just kind of dumped it on the floor? We couldn't conceive of even asking the question, let alone actually doing it. No one would say, God, I'm looking for a place to hook up my household sewage to. Would you mind if I just ran a pipe and it just, came right here into the temple, into the church, into the mosque, into the gurdwara? The concept is sacrilege. And so helping people understand. Because see, the mom analogy, that's just my physical mom. People would say, well, that's just because that's my mom in her body. But Ganga's the goddess. Ganga's the divine mom. So she's not subject necessarily to the rules that one would think apply to a physical person. Ganga doesn't get sick. Ganga doesn't need a hand across the street. Ganga, But when you talk about a temple, then suddenly everybody gets it. if we are worshiping Ganga in any way, we're offering flowers, we're offering prayer, we're offering light, well, we do that to the divine. And everyone agrees, yeah, Ganga's the goddess. Well, if she's the goddess, it means that this whole form, whether there's 4 walls or not 4 walls, this is a temple. And this has actually been a campaign that has worked very, very well. This is what Pujya Swamiji did here on our God. When he first got here in 1969, there were no ghats on the banks of Ganga. It was nothing but rocks. And every morning people would go to the banks of Ganga to go to the toilet. And it disturbed him deeply, deeply from the beginning. And so he started a variety of different awareness campaigns, education campaigns. Population was nothing at that point, so it wasn't like a massive community issue. It was more for him an aesthetic issue and a deeply spiritual issue of, this is our mother. How can you poop in her? He then built toilets, attached bathrooms in all of the rooms in the ashram, which itself was a revolution. People thought that was just the grossest thing they could imagine. How can you possibly put a toilet where you sleep? Literally. And this is not 100 years ago. This is 30 years ago. Mid-80s. 1980s, not 1880s. I mean, those of us from abroad, you think, you're right, 1880s you mean, right? No, 1980s. People couldn't imagine. When he came in, there were not attached bathrooms in the rooms. People could not imagine having an attached bathroom. This is gross. We'll go outside. It's pure. It's beautiful. On the banks of Ganga, it feels so clean and fresh. So he then tried a new campaign, which was to begin the Ganga Aarti, which served 2 purposes. One, of course, was to revitalize the devotion that people have for Ganga, to gather them every evening together in prayer, and the very simple awareness that no one is going to poop in the morning where they pray in the evening. That by reminding people this is a temple, literally, bring them here to pray, perform the yagna ceremony, the fire, perform the arti. This is now a temple. And he then covered it with marble. And the open defecation just stopped. Not because people wouldn't defecate on marble, but because this was now a temple. We come here to pray in the evening. And so the campaign actually has been very, very successful. And now you'll see up and down the banks of Ganga, all of the ashrams have built these ghats. He encouraged all of the ashrams, build ghats, marble it over. It's beautiful. People love it. They can sit more comfortably on the banks of Ganga. They can meditate. He's encouraged everybody start arti. When we first started, we were the only one. For years, we were the only one. Now, over the last few years, if you look up and down Ganga while Aarti is going on, you'll see, oh, up there's one. Oh, up there's another one. Oh, down there's another one. And sometimes people say to him, well, don't you mind that these other people have also started Aarti? And he always says, this is what I've been trying to convince people to do for decades. When we have Aarti up and down the banks of Ganga, everyone will remember this is a temple. And when everyone remembers it's a temple, we don't need to put up signs that say don't defecate here. Because it doesn't matter how badly you have to go, nobody in any city of the world, no matter how desperate they are, no matter how badly they're looking for a bathroom and can't find one, is going to walk into their nearest temple or church or a mosque and squat down and go to the toilet. Form and content, okay, we don't throw our trash in Ganga. Whether it's because I recognize the content as divine and therefore the place is a temple, or whether because I recognize that people depend on the form, and therefore to protect them, I'm not going to dump my trash. But as you so rightly mentioned, we have this third dimension, and into that third dimension comes our much deeper existence. Because if you look at what it is that is removing Ganga, it's us. It's us. It's development, as you say. It's choices. It's us saying, for example, we want to farm in a chemical heavy way, in a non-organic way. We want to farm crops that are not right for this area because this is what's lucrative. We want to farm with heavy fertilizer use because it's going to grant me a more lucrative harvest. And therefore, we are going to divert a larger amount of the water from our river into our farms. There's a finite amount of water. Either she's running in the riverbeds or she's irrigating our fields. And as we are developing, these are choices. Again, there's not a moral police that gets to say, thou shalt do this or that. God has granted us all free will. Some could argue that wasn't necessarily the smartest thing. But nonetheless, we've been granted free will. We have it. It's in our hands. And when prophets, my prophet today, this month, this year, overshadow the greater good, when I look at the cost of something as being only that which it costs me, but not that which it costs the earth, the water, all of the other people with whom I share this earth and this water, well, then I make decisions like, let's get into agriculture of crops that require gobs of water in places where we don't have gobs of water, crops that are not meant to be grown here because they require lots of water. This is not a water-intensive place. Crops that take chemical fertilizers. Let's use chemical pesticides. All of this ends up diverting our water. Let's divert it to create electricity. Because what we need are more and more things that run on electricity. Bigger, bigger, more, more. We too should become like a city that never sleeps. We too should have a city where the lights are on 24 hours a day. It's our choice. And what's happening, the other aspect of what's happening, of course, is as the water level is going down, even if the pollutants were not increasing, even imagine for a moment, this isn't true, but even imagine for a moment that we were able to stabilize the amount of pollution. Well, the percentage of pollution still would continue to increase because the amount of water is going down. So the dilution is in such a way that even if the toxins that we were pouring into her stayed the same, it's still a greater dilution, a greater percentage. And the other major aspect that this relates to within development has to do with industry. Because the greatest contributors to the pollutants in Ganga are the industries, the tanneries. Not only the tanneries, they're a huge percentage of it, but not exclusively. Well, they produce in what we call the law of supply and demand. As long as there's demand for more, 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 cheaper, 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 people are going to keep cutting corners. They're going to do whatever they can do to make the cost cheaper because now they're in competition. And this is because of our internal lack of sense of abundance, lack of fullness, lack of enoughness, that I need to buy more and own more in order to feel full, in order to feel content. I mean, do we all really need that many pairs of shoes? Do we really need this many pairs of pants? Are we really living in a way that with everything we buy, we look not only at the price tag on the item, but we look at the whole chain of who and what has been impacted by giving me this item at such a cheap price? Well, somebody's paid for it. If it's not me, who's paying for it? And it's an existential dilemma. It's a spiritual dilemma. It's a human moral dilemma. Because as long as I'm looking for more, cheaper, 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 that's the demand. And yeah, we can blame the courts for not passing stricter laws, but the truth is the laws are there. We can blame the government for not properly enforcing it. They're doing their best. But what that does is absolves us of the responsibility. And the truth is that economics are where it's all about. I remember when I was young, before I became a vegetarian when I was 15. So sometime prior to being 15, I used to eat tuna fish. And I learned one day that the tuna industry, that the people who fish for tuna lives around dolphins, because the dolphins eat the tuna. So wherever there's lots of tuna, there's also lots of dolphins. And the way that the tuna fishermen work, they're not going out with fishing poles and lines and trying to, catch a tuna. They go out in these huge boats, they drop these nets that sometimes are miles long, and they go along the ocean, again for miles, and then they pull up their nets and they throw away everything that's not what they're fishing for. If I'm a tuna fisherman, I only want tuna. If I'm a salmon fisherman, I only want salmon. Everything else that's in their nets gets tossed. But of course, by that time, it's already died. And the amount of dolphins who die in tuna fishermen's nets is phenomenal. But I share the story because, so I was maybe, 10, 11, 12, whatever I was. And I learned this. And what I was told was, you can buy, Greenpeace, I think it was, ran a huge campaign, dolphin safe tuna. So they weren't saying don't eat tuna. They weren't trying to turn everybody vegetarian. But on cans of tuna fish, there would be a little logo with a picture of a dolphin that said dolphin safe tuna. As in, no dolphins have been killed in catching this tuna. And everybody would only buy dolphin safe tuna. And the industry literally had to change. Similar campaign happened when Coors Beer wouldn't pull out of apartheid South Africa. Everybody else had pulled out. All the other big multinational companies had pulled out in order to put pressure on the South African government. Coors wouldn't pull out. It was too economically lucrative to keep being able to employ cheap African labor. Governments put sanctions, and everybody tried to put sanctions. Nothing worked. Finally, people just boycotted Coors Beer. Nobody would buy a Coors Beer. And what all sorts of other sanctions couldn't do, economics did. And I share these two examples because we, the consumer, we have the power. If we created a situation where we said, okay, we're not saying don't buy leather. We're not, again, as I said, the moral police. But could you have Ganga safe leather? Could you have a certification whereby those industries who produced leather without one drop of waste going into Ganga or into the groundwater got some sort of a stamp? And then a nationwide campaign went out that we would only buy Ganga safe leather? But as long as we're clamoring for more and more, cheaper and cheaper, people are screaming about the government's failure to clean Ganga. And then they go out and everybody wants leather car seats and leather handbags and leather shoes and leather belts. And it's like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're literally going out and with our rupees supporting the very industry that we're over here picketing against. And so what it gives us is the opportunity to really realize, wow, I've got the opportunity to make a difference. Can I start demanding organic food? Can I insist that my local grocer carries organic food? Am I prepared to pay an extra few rupees for organic food until it becomes mainstream? Can I think 10 times before I decide I need a new mobile? Or a new anything? Is the old one still good? Am I buying it because I really need it? Or am I buying it because I'm bored, or I'm depressed, or I'm frustrated? Am I buying it to fill a hole in my heart that it's not going to be able to fill anyway? Because if I am, I lose anyway. And then Ganga loses. And everybody loses. And this is really where you could say spirituality and activism come together. Because, yeah, we can scream about tanneries and we can scream about industries, but as long as my favorite form of therapy is shopping therapy, I'm creating more problems than I'm solving. But the only antidote to the need for shopping therapy is spirituality. Because that which is leading me to feel like, oh, if I just could have another pair of shoes, I would feel so much happier. Oh my God, I had a really bad fight with my husband or my wife. I'm going to go shopping. And I come home with 5 bags of goods and I feel better. Well, as long as that's what I'm doing to self-soothe, as long as my concept of self is being filled by things outside me, well, those things are being produced in industries that are destroying our environment. And whether it's Ganga here, or whether it's our ozone layer across the planet, that which is happening today is happening as a direct result of our actions. And this is not that we should all walk out of here and feel horrendously guilty, but we should walk out and feel incredibly empowered. Because it's not just about our state governments, it's not just about the courts, it's not just about what big multinationals do. It's actually about the decisions that we all make every day. What do I buy? What do I wear? What do I eat? How do I live? How do I fill my holes? And that takes us into the deepest aspect. So, yeah, thanks, Sanmeji, for